What's your framework to kind of approach the first job you'd like to do?
A lot of young people just stumble into marketing and build their careers in it.
I think people forget that product is one of the P's in marketing.
It's so important for product and marketing to work together. As a young startup, you have to also figure out speed versus depth. We all want to scale very dramatically, millions of views on our content and get great engagement, but you also want to build a global brand. So how do you find that balance? How do you stay authentic to who you are and still focus on the long game? To be a leader, at least in the long run, you have to be a generalist. But in the beginning, you definitely need areas that you can specialize in.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with IndieFolio. Today we have Shweta Sivasankaran joining us, who is the head of marketing at Airlearn. We unpack Shweta's incredible journey where she started off as an engineer, transitioned into marketing, and then built some of the fastest growing startups you know of. Today she's building a global brand and also talks a lot about her personal journeys and how she's learned over the years. It's a must for young marketers today who want to stay relevant in the age of AI. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the podcast, Shweta.
Happy to be here, Kavan. I think we've been in touch for a while, so I'm excited to be here.
It was a long time in the making, so excited we're finally here. I think when I look at your career over the last few years, it's been very exciting from doing engineering to, I think, hopping on to some very hyper growth startups to now building a product for the globe from India. I think it's really exciting. But before we get into all of that, I want to first take you to, I believe you're in Jaipur doing BTech, right? Chemical engineering. You, I think, also won awards. You've done really very well wherever you've been. How is it that somebody who was doing so well, decided that, okay, I want to completely change my trajectory to something like marketing?
To be very honest, I think most young kids in India, Kavan, who are good with math and science, I think engineering just seemed like a logical next step, or at least it did back in the day. And I had a decent AIEEE rank. I got into an NIT. Then the question was, why would you not go, right? Did my engineering. When I graduated, I was placed with a public sector EPC company. And back then, this is 2010, most of my batchmates are getting these IT jobs, and here I had landed this core engineering job. And then the question again was, why would you not take that up? You'd be stupid to not take that up. So I did that. And then obviously I had experience in engineering consulting. So I went on to do that in Singapore as well. I did that with a global engineering consulting firm. And, I think I just kept doing it because I didn't suck at it, to be very honest. I think somewhere along the way, I knew I was not very excited by, calculating pump efficiencies and running simulations. But that was it. I just knew that I didn't want to do that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So there wasn't really any grand plan to move to marketing. I think that was something that I discovered along the way, partly because, around that time, my husband was managing the Head and Shoulders portfolio and PNG. So I was very curious about what he did. I was also, because of him and by design, hanging out with a lot of folks in marketing. So I got to learn more about what they were doing. And when we were in the UK, I was lucky that I got the chance to sort of, try something else, right? I think people are a lot more open to giving you an opportunity to dabble in something you don't have experience on paper in, right? So that's why, that's when I really started my marketing journey, right? So I worked with Oxfam, which was a non-profit that operates like a retail major in the UK. And that was really my first exposure to marketing, right? I knew that I was always very structured and analytical in the way that I operated, but I was also very creative. I liked writing, I liked storytelling. And I think that's when I realized maybe this was it. And if I didn't move now, then I would just be stuck doing this for a really long time. So I had to take a lot of active, steps to make this transition happen.
I think it's a very relatable story to a lot of people, right? I think what happens often to a lot of young marketers I speak to is the signals which they're supposed to kind of track to know if they're good at something or if this is for them are always
Yeah.
on their side, right? Like good grades, good job, good salary.
Hmm.
Um, and I think one must assume that I probably like it and that's why I'm good at it.
Yeah.
And as you said, there was no reason to kind of stop it.
Yeah.
I see a lot of my friends. I'm just going to turn 30 in some time, and a lot of my friends are also in a very similar stage right now where they're pretty smart,
Yeah.
and whatever they do, they tend to do a decent job because they know how to do time management. They're effective,
Hmm.
but a lot of them are like, "Do I really love what I do?" And I wanted to ask you, right, like, how do you really find a passion or something which you feel is a little bit deeper than what you're good at, because clearly you were really good at what you did but you still felt something was missing. So I'm trying to kind of get an answer for folks who are unsure if they're unhappy right now despite of the signals being good, on how do they know what to do next which feels maybe more fulfilling.
Great question. I mean, to be very honest, I think it's different for different people, Kavan. I mean, in my case, it just meant I would have continued doing this forever,
Mhm.
right? Till I said that, look, I really need to try something else. I need to stop right now. And that's hard to do after 4 to 5 years of experience in something entirely different, right? So I think the first thing you need to do is just be like open to the fact that, you're you need to figure this out, and it is it is figuring it out, right? So that does mean that you need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take this plunge right now, let me try this because I think this might be something that I'm good at. Look, that also needs to, it's a two-way street, right? You making that decision is not good enough. You need an organization, you need people who believe that you can do that as well. So in my case, I did have people who said, look, why don't you try it out, and we're willing to take that bet, or we're willing to take that leap of faith, right? So I think it's both. Sometimes some people aren't able to transition because to a different domain because they don't have that kind of support,
Mm.
and sometimes it's just because you're risk averse, or you're scared to kind of start from scratch, right? And
Exactly.
build something from ground up, right? So I think it's also in some sense timing, it's life stage, a lot of those things as well, right? So um, unless you do it, you're never going to do know, right? And sometimes people try something out and they realize maybe this is not my thing as well. But to be very honest, Kavan, I work with a lot of young people. Most of my team are like in their mid 20s, and I find that young people are a lot more open to trying things out and experimenting and even calling it quits when uh, you know
Yeah.
yeah, it's not working out for them, right? Like, you don't end up doing this for 4 or 5 years and then deciding that you need to change. So that's definitely one change that I see, which is great. But yeah, unless you do it, you'll never know, I guess.
The first job which you end up doing is often talked about as one of the most critical steps you'll take, right? Often, and I want to try and understand from you now as a marketer,
Hmm.
that if you were to give an advice to somebody about their first job, how would you approach it? Because there's a lot of feedback going around that you know sales is great, you'll get to know the customer well, maybe
Yeah.
join the agency side, you will get a lot of category and segments, within 2 years you learn everything about all of those, at least advertising communication wise. And today if you do an MBA, and there's also a opportunity for you to work with a large brand as a brand manager itself from the get go. How would you approach, what's your framework rather, to kind of approach the first job you'd like to do?
Hmm. Actually, that's not true. I think I went into B school thinking that I would just land a marketing job and just, that's actually not true in India. I
Okay.
think the rite of passage to a marketing role is through sales. So I think if you go to a B school, and there are very very few marketing jobs, and unless you've had, pre MBA experience in an ad agency or something like that, it's extremely difficult to land a marketing job. I think with me, just because I ended up doing something that I studied for so many years and then making this change somewhere mid career, um, it was like a lot of like choices and decisions that I had to take to make this change. I mean, to be very honest, I don't think I would have ever gone to B school if I did not want to make this switch so badly, right? A lot of young people just stumble into marketing and build their careers in it. A lot of young people stumble into sales and build their careers in it. And to be very honest, I personally, I don't think you need like a big grand plan in the beginning when you're 20. I feel like this is the time for you to at least have some understanding of, you need some understanding of what you're good at and what you suck at.
Mm.
And then you need people who will bet on that, who will take a chance on you. A lot of people that I hire today, Kavan, are very young people without experience in anything, right? I tell them, look, I will hire you and I will teach you YouTube, and you will be like one of the top, uh, people who understand YouTube in this country, right? Because we understand YouTube really well, and that's uh, that's a byproduct of just being at a place where, we get this channel, for instance, or we get how to create content on YouTube. So that's what you learn. So what I look for is just how hungry are you to learn, how much of like urgency do you have to learn,
Mm.
right, basically, rather than anything. And just being able to navigate through all of these challenges that you will have typically in a fast paced startup, with poise and with agility, and not just being overwhelmed by it, right? So I don't know if I answered your question. How do you find what you're good at? I think it's also about, uh, I don't think you need to specifically say, I'm only going to look at sales roles, right? Like, try to look at options around sales. Okay, sales and marketing are fairly close. If you think that, look, marketing is of interest, but you're not able to crack a marketing opportunity, start in sales. It's okay. In fact, it's a great place to start and then sort of transition to marketing. But just have like some tenets on where your interest lies,
Right.
and work on those and develop some skills, talk to people, research, learn. I think with AI, it's like so much more easier to do research and to brainstorm and think of stuff. But yeah, in the beginning, I would just say do, right? Like, do, and then it's okay. In 1 year, you realize it's not my cup of tea. Like, move on. It's okay, right?
I feel,
Hmm.
like you said, there's a lot of growth,
Yeah.
global growth. You're still, compared to, having like a large, a
Hmm.
budget. I think it's still pretty lean when you
Yeah,
look at the
it
zero to
is.
one. So, can you tell a little bit more about your learnings in terms of this playbook you've built, right? If I want to do a zero to one, let's say I have
Hmm.
a product I want to kind of make global. What areas, I think,
Yeah.
have you learned work the best, and what should I focus on?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have a playbook as yet. We're just a year into building the product. But look, I mean, couple of things that I think are really important. You need a great product, right? It needs to solve it for some problem that consumers in that market that you're building for have, right? And in our case, we realize people don't just want to memorize words, they want to be able to have conversations. So I think the product directly addresses that, and that for us, if you ask me, that's the most important thing. You need like a great product. The second, I think, is just go to market. I think we looked at a market that we wanted to crack. We looked at the intent. Why do people learn a language? We looked at platforms that people are consuming um, in the US, and the nature of those platforms. For example, in this case, it's TikTok, right? So we focused on a creator driven content strategy, right? Which is people just coming out and saying that, hey, I use this product, or I'm using this product, and this is what I've learned, right? So real experiences from people who are using the product. And that created a lot of organic pull. To summarize, I think, look, number one, you need to be focusing on your product, get your product right, and then try to get traction market fit, right? Start focusing on um, where where do you think it makes most sense for your product to be talking to the consumer, right? In An Academy's case, it was YouTube, because kids were already on YouTube, consuming a lot of free content. So it made sense for us to crack YouTube, right? In this case, it's short form and it's TikTok. So yeah, that's sort of two things that I would say are absolutely important. Um, and in zero to one, look, as a young startup, you have to also figure out speed versus depth. We all want to scale very dramatically, millions of views on our content and get great engagement, but you also want to build a global brand. So how do you find that balance? How do you stay authentic to who you are, and still focus on the long game, right? I think that's sort of the hardest part, if you ask me, in a zero to
Right.
one, because we're so focused on scaling. But yeah, I think these two things are really important to crack in the beginning.
You mentioned product quite often, and I think people forget that product is one of the P's in marketing. Often, when you're in a tech company, I see sometimes product and marketing actually fighting with each other, right? About
Mm.
hey, what do you want? Your timelines, deadlines, call outs versus
Yeah,
work experience in engineering, etc. How does a marketer, especially in a zero to one,
yeah,
influence product? What inputs can they give, and how can they really shape the product strategy?
yeah. um it's so important for product and marketing to work together, because we are so close to the consumer. So, I mean, initially, when when it's just the product and people using the product, like I said, we were using TikTok to get people to download the product and use the product. And slowly we started seeing a lot of reviews, especially on social media, people talking about the product, etc. We work so closely, right? We are able to share those inputs and insights with um, our product teams, right? And they are able to decide what features to roll out next, etc. Right?
Mm.
I mean, strange things like, a lot of consumers telling us that, hey, I want to personalize my cat, right? This is something that came from the user, right? I don't think the product team would have ever wanted to pick this up as soon as they did, just because a lot of users wanted us to do that, right?
Wow.
So I feel like in the early stage you have to be working very closely together, and especially when you want to play the long game, which is building the brand. How the product communicates has to be um, very much in line with what we want to say as a brand as well, right? So I think in the beginning it's also hard though, right? Like, because they have their own roadmap, they have their own priorities. We're trying to crack traction, we're trying to get users to sample the product, etc. So a lot of times that does get missed, and it's harder. But I think it's really important for both teams to be able to zoom out and see the bigger picture, and just say like, okay, this is why this makes sense, and this is why we need to do what we're doing, right? So yeah.
Content or an influencer led strategy gets people pretty confused today. They're
Mm.
usually wondering, should I go with the nano micro ones? Should I go with the bigger ones? How do I ensure that it's not like one blip? It's
Mm.
like a consistent thing. Any advice there for marketers?
Again, two things. I think it depends, like, on your product, your pricing, and a lot of things like that, right? Look, I'll give you the example of Airlearn, right? I'm a $40 yearly subscription product, right? So uh, again, again, it's very different from Unacademy. Unacademy is such a high involvement product. People sample so much of free content.
Hmm.
People use the product for weeks, months before they take a decision to buy. But for something that is not discretionary buy, right? I don't know if it's going to change your life. Some might think it might. Some maybe like, look, this is just a hobby, etc. It's a very different way that users would approach a product like that, right? So in that case, you also, I think, at least I look at it in a very performance. I have a very performance driven mindset to these things. If the CAC LTV math does not make sense,
Hmm.
I don't do it. Um, Typically, for a lower price product, I like that we use a lot of small creators, try to create some narrative around that, get them to talk about my product on more instances than one, where we feel like it's more of like a brand campaign of sorts. We want to craft a narrative, or like control perception, or talk about a specific launch, etc. Then we I like to go with larger creators or influencers, people who have the ability to really influence, right?
Hmm.
So what I've noticed with small creators is that they're great with they bring some authenticity when they're using the product, and they're kind of creating multiple pieces of content around it, and you can kind of plan that across the board using multiple creators. And for a larger campaign or announcement or product launch, etc., larger creators make sense, because um, they're also influencers, right? And they have the ability, and that's, by the way, one thing that I have learned, right? um, there is a difference between a creator and an influencer. right? So and of course, once you work with them is when you'll be able to know, right? I've had videos that have done millions of views but done nothing for the brand,
Hmm.
right? So I think that in some sense is something that you'll have to figure out for your brand specifically as well.
Fantastic. No, I think that's a really good framework to kind of depend on. Um, I think, now it's time to kind of talk about AI finally and address
Mm.
the elephant in the room, right? Um, Obviously, we all know it's here to stay, here to change, it's going to
Yeah.
do a lot, we have to learn it, etc.
Mm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what are you particularly bullish on, uh, on AI? Like, what will it do, especially to the role of marketing? With the objective that if I am currently trying to understand how to navigate AI as a marketer, what
Mm.
should I double down on as per you?
Mm. Yeah, I think you can't ignore it, right? Like I said, I myself use AI a lot in the work that I do. um, I don't think right now it entirely uh, can do the job of a marketer, if you ask me. I use it a lot to brainstorm. I use it a lot to derive insights, and a lot of data analysis is what I use AI for. And I think people need to be marketers. At least young marketers need to embrace it rather than compete with it, right? So I think that learning is extremely important in terms of where AI is going to be used, right? Like for example, I give you the example of, let's say, digital marketing, for instance, right? I think let's take a use case. Let's take maybe mass personalization, right? Previously, example is you check some travel bags on Mokobara, for instance, right? And now you're going to be chased all over the internet with bags, travel bags from so many different brands and Mokobara themselves, right? I do think with smarter data and AI, that is possibly going to change. There is going to be a lot more context rich, um, lifestyle driven engagement, if you ask me, right?
Mhm.
Like larger stuff like ultimate travel experiences or travel wellness, or stuff that's beyond just travel bags, that can be sort of curated and used to target consumers, right? So I think that there is an opportunity to change the way that users actually interact with and relate to products. And I feel like AI can play a role in that. I do think learner journeys, for instance, right? Typically, depending on user behavior on your product, etc., you create these journeys to talk to the consumer at different points. I feel like AI can play a huge role in that as well. So yeah, I think it's definitely not something that we can ignore. I think we are very far away from knowing exactly all of the use cases
Mm.
of AI in marketing specifically. But I do think the easy ones, of course, are just writing and design and stuff like that. Recently, I made a film on Google Flow for Airlearn. Obviously, it took me like pretty much, I don't know how many credits I used. I started like, but I got what I wanted by the end of it. But
Fantastic.
even just getting the prompt right,
Mm.
I mean, took me a lot of time, right? So I realized that I have to even specify the camera lens specifications have to be given, right? Product positioning. So I basically, by the end of it, sure, I got a film that was kind of close to what I wanted, but at least I learned how to, write a really solid prompt to get there, right? So I think filmmaking, digital marketing, all of this will definitely have a huge touch of AI going forward, and I think it's important to learn, and embrace that really quickly, because yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I think in the future it's definitely
Great.
going to be more important.
On that note, like we at Indiefolio, we are like a community of founders of boutique agencies or independent professionals in the creative realm.
Hmm.
They are really anxious when they hear stuff like this, right? They're like, oh my God, now the clients themselves are making, films. What
Hmm.
will we do?
Yeah.
So we talk to a lot of agency owners and we
Yeah.
represent them.
Yeah.
What's your advice to them to stay relevant in the coming years?
Uh, I think, look, the real value that I see that comes from a really great agency is, I think good agencies just execute briefs, right? Great agencies elevate it, right? And that can be in terms of tools, tech, etc. It can also be in terms of insights, the way that a story is told, etc. as well, right? So I think it is, to be very honest, as cliche as it may sound, to go beyond the brief, right? While that's sort of the base thing that you build something on. I think that's what clients want, to be challenged, to be asked, why does this make sense? And I'll tell you an example. I mean, I think it was when we were doing the Let's Crack It campaign for Unacademy. It was the first campaign that we did. Obviously, I'd written the brief, and we'd written all of the stuff about, a product, right? Which is, it's easy to use, convenient, at, in the palm of your hand, etc., etc. And and I remember this was in a meeting with Ogilvy, and I was talking to Sonal Dabral, and he said, "Look, Shweta, that's not how you should be saying this, right? I mean, people want to struggle for 2 years, stay away from their families, not eat any food. It's like this penance. That's what makes success sweeter. You can't come in and tell them that it's easy. It's not easy, right? So don't do that, because it's disrespectful, right?" And that changed the way that I myself thought about it. I said, look, so we can't tell you that we take the hardship away, because it is going to be hard. But what we can do is take the suffering away, right? Which is, you don't have to suffer for lack of access to good teachers or learning material, or that flexibility to learn where you want, etc. But to me, like, I think that's what agencies need to think about. It's not just about executing a brief, right? Because then we are trying to build those capabilities ourselves, right? I direct, I produce, I do all of these things that I never thought that I would do in my career. Because we're also looking, we run lean teams, we're also looking to control costs, etc. So unless an agency is really like changing my life, I think twice about engaging with one.
Got it. No, I think that is easier said than done. Everybody says go beyond the brief,
Yeah,
but and everybody I think wants to, but very few do.
sure.
I think what a fantastic example, by the way. I'll keep that in mind. What Sonal said.
Yeah,
Um, this brings us to the last question. Now, thank you so
yeah,
much, Shweta. I hope you are having a good time.
yeah,
Uh, on the last question, right? I think you already shared a bunch of this, but as a final takeaway and a
Hmm.
closing thought, I want you to speak to a young marketer today who maybe wants to be a CMO one day, be a
Hmm.
marketing leader one day.
Yeah,
Um, as per you, what are the few things I should be doing in the next 1 year to
yeah,
ensure that I have a solid career progression?
yeah. So I think in the first few years, and I can't stress this enough, just experiment, learn things, try different things. And this is maybe year 1 and 2, right? By the end of year 2, you better figure out something that you are good at and that you can, in some sense, specialize in. And I think it's important to specialize in something, right? So I think year 2 to 5 or year 2 to 6 actually have something that you're good at, right? Because that's what helps with promotions. That's what helps you, sell yourself better as well, right? As a marketer. So I do think that specialization is important. Focus on something that you can go deep in, and develop expertise in. And then 6 years onwards, I think, again, now you need to be a generalist, because um, that's what's going to take you far, right? Because I will be sitting in the evening discussing strategy with Gaurav. Next morning I'm at a shoot with my team, and in the evening I'm looking at data. I think that ability to switch contexts is extremely important as a leader. And it's important to be a generalist. I mean, for two reasons: one, because as a leader, that's a skill set that you need; two, because it insulates you from, I don't know, AI taking over your job or something, right? So, yeah, I mean, I would just say first few years focus on trying different things, learning, and picking up at least something that you love and you want to go deep in. Next few years, build expertise in that, and then finally start learning more about other aspects of marketing too, right? So brand managers today can't just be like clueless about performance marketing, not understand how Google Ads work, or how targeting works, or how to look at data. And I don't think performance marketers can be clueless about um, what goes into what effective communication is or what creative strategy looks like, right? So I think to be a leader, at least in the long run, you have to be a generalist. But in the beginning, you definitely need areas that you can specialize in.
Awesome. That's such a great articulation of, I think, everything we spoke about. Thank you so much, Shweta. This is the end of our podcast. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kavan, for having me. Lovely chatting with you.
Likewise, and for everybody who's tuned in, if you'd like another marketing leader, please like, share, and subscribe. A new episode will come out very soon. Bye bye.
Bye.